We are not being persecuted in any way. We are privileged and fortunate to be in the country that we are. We have freedom. We have a constitution that protects us, all of us. I mean, to me, it was flabbergasting.
My guest is Jahni De Villiers, Pretoria-based labour law expert and human resources professional. And I've invited her here today primarily because she's aligned with, not a member of, aligned with the Not in My Name declaration. Welcome to the program, Jahni.
Thank you so much.
It's great meeting you, and perhaps it's a little bit unfair, but I want to share with our viewers how we actually met, because we actually met online.
We did.
I joined the Afrikaners for South Africa, Afrikaners for South Africa group, and kind of put out an invitation for members to make contact with me and to talk to me on my podcast. And you kind of reacted with a "not in my name,"
Very
saying
much so.
that you will not accept an invitation from me because I platform people like Jaco Kleinhans and Kali Kriel and the other guys. So here we are.
Here we are. And thank you very much for inviting me despite that. I appreciate it.
I say that because I think it's a very important point, Jahni, and I'm not just digging at you now for the fun of it. It is important that we talk to one another, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. And I think, for you, I think you're in a unique position that you are able to hear all of these different inputs from all sides of the political spectrum. I think more so than those of us who just in our daily lives are going on with our daily grind. And I think, well, I know my reaction was definitely based on being in the trenches at that stage and under attack from the very people who we were standing up against and saying, you're not speaking on my behalf. And for some reason, saying that those organizations cannot speak on our behalf triggered a landslide of different attacks.
I get it.
Definitely in the throes of that.
Yeah, I get it. I think the broader point I'm trying to make here, though, is at the end of the day, I think I'm cautious simply because I think there is something called freedom of speech. And I do think it's a healthy thing for us to allow one another to express our opinions, whether we agree or not agree. I just think that that's the last thing that we have left, is to be able to communicate with one another. I don't like deplatforming. So I guess my question would be, now we're having this fantastic opportunity to meet one another and to test each other's ideas with one another. You're not part of the deplatforming philosophy or group, are you?
Johan, I'm going to disappoint you many times this afternoon. I can feel it. So I yes and no. I feel that we can engage in civilized debate with each other, definitely, on a wide variety of topics. I think that human beings are wonderfully diverse and we believe all sorts of diverse things, and I do not have any issue with that. Where my challenge comes in is if my humanity or the humanity of people in very vulnerable groups are denied or mischaracterized. To give you an example, I am not in favor of platforming people who have extreme Christian nationalist views at all. Mm-hmm. I think it's dangerous content to have out there. I think with the internet, the way that it is at the moment, the lack of regulation, for you and I to see something in context as adults and say, I'm not engaging with this, I'm walking away, is one thing. I think there are very vulnerable people, and here I have to come in as the mother of teenagers, where it is at this stage a full-time job just to try and keep the extreme right-wing ecosystem away from teens and from children. I am in favor of deplatforming people who dehumanize others. I'm completely in favor of that.
I get your point, and I think that what you say also makes sense. There's also a lot of stuff that I encounter on social media that I just think, for heaven's sake, let's not do this. It should be. So I fully understand that. It is, though, a debate for another day, so we're not going to talk too much about that. Talk about activism. I read somewhere a little. I didn't do much research, but I checked you up a little bit on the internet. You started your activism at the age of 7 or something like that? No, grade 7, I beg your pardon. At a young age. Tell me about that.
I've always been difficult, and I claim that label 100%. I've always felt like I have a voice. I have, I'm able to stand up for myself, but I'm also able to stand up for others. So I think the thing that sticks with me through childhood and then in my school career as well was the ability to stand up for people who couldn't do that for themselves. And to be very protective towards my family, but also protective towards my classmates. And we staged a sit-in at 13 years old. That's where I understood the might of the collective. And if I recall correctly, was something to do with the civvies-day. We were not allowed a civvies-day. So we decided as leaders, as the big kids of the school, we would go and sit in the school principal's office until he reconsiders. And he reconsidered. So it was successful. But that always stayed with me. And I think I'm used to taking up a cause, especially where I feel like we are making a difference, and that it's very much on behalf of people who are not speaking up or not speaking for themselves.
Yeah. Is that something, just before we get into the discussion and to get to know you a little bit, is that something that you got from your parents? Standing up for the little man, that's really what it's all about.
Absolutely, and we were encouraged to do that as well. So although I'm a 1983 baby, I grew up in a quite a liberal household. So based, we were the usual Afrikaner family. We go to church on Sundays, but we were literally involved in outreach programs and feeding schemes. I remember that so vividly since I was a very, very small girl. By the time you were able to reach the kitchen counter, you were making sandwiches for little kids that you don't know who these little kids are, but that's the kind of thing that we did. And my father specifically also raised us, all we 3 daughters, to understand very well that you are a human being, you take up your space in the world. There's no such thing as the traditional gender norms. It was never a discussion. So it very much is where I grew up, but I think it's probably genetic as well. I think if you go back, you're probably going to find a few of me back in the bloodline.
Let's explore that, a young child, the way you grew up. You said a child of 87 or something like that. You mentioned 83. Now 83. I beg your pardon. I just made you younger.
I really appreciate it.
You're a child when Nelson Mandela was released.
Yes.
Tell me about what were you taught about apartheid, our history, about this figure, Nelson Mandela?
I don't recall a time when it was openly discussed in the house necessarily. So it was very much a household where, we don't discuss the politics necessarily. So up until this day, I cannot tell you how my parents voted in the referendum. I have absolutely no idea. It wasn't anything that ever came up. And I think that my awakening and understanding of the political situation in the country definitely came from the time that I was in high school and then also at university. So during school, I was still part of the cohort where we did the great track every year for history. There was nothing in it in terms of the new South Africa, in terms of the different freedom fighters, and all of that history is really something that came to my consciousness afterwards. But we were very much encouraged to read. So my parents wouldn't come in with a specific viewpoint that they wanted us as daughters in the household to have. We were encouraged to read incredibly widely, and make sure that we ingest as much information as possible to get to a point where we can have our own ideas, and that was really, really encouraged. It was so surreal because I was in grade, I mustn't lie to you now, I must have been grade 2, grade 3, when we went into our was it grade 3? Yeah, it was grade 3, when the first change of hands of power started happening, and Nelson Mandela was released. It was grade 1 when Nelson Mandela was released. And primary school I was in Klerksdorp actually had army troops surrounding the school and keeping the school safe. And I could remember looking at this, wondering what on earth is going on, because our parents didn't talk to us about it. I think probably not to alarm us, unnecessarily, but all of our families packed us extra lunch to give to the army troops through the gates around the schools. All of the little kids did that. But it was very surreal. And I remember trepidation in my household for the change that's coming. But I do not recall a single time when it was just said, this is bad, this is terrible, we have to go, this is never going to happen, it's never going to be, it's never going to work. I just didn't grow up in a house like that.
I'm keen to try to understand how young people such as yourself, at that stage, a young child, grew up with this incredible thing that just happened, the freedom of Nelson Mandela, the creation of the new South Africa. And obviously at some point there must be the word apartheid and history that slips into the consciousness, into the awareness. How did you learn about apartheid, and what were the lessons you were taught?
So I learned about apartheid in school, and it would have been in secondary school. But the thing that was done that I've always thought was so interesting is in my school, is the schools that I attended, they definitely went from rhetoric to being apologetic. And we are not going to talk about this. This is a thing that's now happened. It's now finished. We are now the new South Africa. So we went from, and I was a small child back then, but we went from this is how school is going to be, this is the things that we're learning, to we need to practice this new anthem. The new anthem is the thing we need to practice, this new anthem. And all of us need to sing the new anthem. And
that must have been very difficult for a little kid to actually learn the new anthem, not understanding the language at all.
We had no idea, but we loved it, and we learned it phonetically, because there wasn't a single teacher in my school who understood what the language. They had absolutely no idea. So that was up to us to go and learn. But I remember being so proud, and all of us being so proud, and we sang the anthem, and like my parents were just like, "Hey, okay, fabulous, here we go." So it was never but I must say, in terms of apartheid atrocities, those were things that I learned on my own and through my own, reading. And I'm so thankful for good journalism in South Africa. And, really, I think that's something that's such a golden thread through our history, is people who fearlessly spoke out about all the things that were going on. And that really was something that I'm thankful for.
What was your understanding of apartheid as you discovered this theme for yourself? Was it this horrible past, this horrible thing that happened to South Africa? And did it create I think the question I want to get to is, did you grow up with the idea of a sense of guilt in terms of the history of South Africa?
To answer the first part of your question, it was very much framed around, do you see where you live? Do you see that there are townships on the outskirts of town? Do you see how stupid that is? And okay, that's very silly. Now people can't get to work. It's a crisis. That it was very much framed in practical terms. And I was not raised with guilt because of who I am. But what I was definitely raised with is you are privileged to be born where you are and to have what you have. And I grew up in a single income, very middle class family. My mom never worked. My father worked for the post office, and then he worked for Telkom. But what they really imprinted in us, and I think part of it was the kind of churches we attended and the things that we did, was you are here because you're meant to be here, but please understand that is also an accident of birth. You are not more deserving than somebody who was born in a township who doesn't have two parents, or somebody in an orphanage, or somebody who has less than you. You are not special. The things that you have are loaned to you, and you need to have stewardship over that. But you also need to share. and you need to make sure that is, you can't sleep well knowing that there are people who are really suffering out there. So it wasn't guilt, but it was a very keen sense of the fact that we are privileged.
Yeah. You used the word privileged now twice, white privilege. When you as a young child begin to unpack that idea of white privilege to yourself, what does that translate into for yourself? Does it create within you then a sense, a desire of, I need to talk to the other side, I need to explore the other side, or I need to give back? I think that in the Afrikaner declaration, and I talked to Lindy about this big word, atonement. Was that something that got triggered in you as a young girl, as you were growing up through your secondary school already, the ideas of what is expressed in the declaration of atonement because of this white privilege?
Yes, but I think it's more than atonement, because for me, atonement, I obviously I support the way that it's set out in the declaration. So I'm sharing my personal experience with you. I've never felt that I need to personally atone for something I didn't personally do wrong, but what it did trigger in me is such a keen sense of, I can use this. I can to give you an example of the kind of work that I do. I'm somebody who has to speak on behalf of groups. I'm somebody who has to go and influence policy domestically and internationally. If I can empower a young colleague from a different background who maybe didn't have that and encourage them to use their voice and push them to the forward, then I'm going to do it, because it's a gift to be able to have this to give back.
Now, if I want to peeve people off on this podcast that I'm doing, I only have to say I think there's a need for a revision of apartheid. Or I would suggest to my listeners and viewers that it is important for us to deal with the history of South Africa. And that gets a lot of people very, we don't want to talk about apartheid anymore. We've had enough of apartheid. All we hear is this guilt thing, which I also fully understand. In fact, even Lindy spoke about this constant having to, wear this guilt on your shoulders in South Africa that are in fact wearing people down. But the question is, do you think that, and I'm going to talk about Afrikaners specifically, white people, Afrikaners specifically, have really dealt with our history, and that we've given apartheid the correct, whatever that correct might be, place in our understanding of our world?
Yeah, I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so. And I think one of the biggest gifts that I've had as a mom is to be able to go through the history curriculum with both of my kids, because things have changed. Obviously, the way that it is now, to go through that and to see through their eyes exactly how they experience it, and exactly what is taught to them and how it is framed to them as well, because it's interesting. I think we have white Afrikaners, myself included, I think we jump so quickly to no, but we have to move forward. Like, we have to do something. We have to be practical. We have to, now we're stuck in the past, and people don't want to listen to the past. They don't want to delve into the past. That regime hurt us as a society, all of us. It hurt some of us more than others. But I think we need to acknowledge the scar that's on us as well. And what I mean by that is, there is a reason it is so difficult to be a united country. And that reason is apartheid. That reason is the fact that there are still people alive today who were victimized in terms of apartheid, who were told where they could live, who were told who they could love, who were completely controlled by the state and completely subjected to apartheid. And they have that within them. Like I told you my story today. They are telling their story to their children as well, because it's an important part of their history. It's not keeping anything alive. It is an important part of their history, but it also means that the mistrust between different racial groups are still there. And it's going to take, somebody has to be the adult in the room, in the sense of, I'm not saying I'm taking every single thing that happened on my shoulders, but I'm a human being and able to say, yes, it happened. It was horrible. I really think we should all look at that, learn from that, and make sure that it's never repeated again. I think Lindy, as a historian, I'm so glad you had her on as well, because historians understand patterns. And if you don't recognize what has happened in your country, how do you prevent something like that from happening again in the future? And there is a balance there. I think, to answer your question, we have definitely not dealt with.
There is something I want to mention to you about me growing up. I was matriculated in 1974, so I'm much older than you. But I remember in 1973, the United Nations declared apartheid a crime against humanity. My impression, and I know once again people get very angry when I say these things, is that we've not really fully taken on board what that means. That the United Nations declared apartheid a crime against humanity. I guess the question would be, do you think, and once again, I know people get very angry that we ought to go back and revisit our history to try to really fully understand our history and to understand where we are today, that revision is in fact a necessity for us to be able to grow into the future.
Well, I think it's a necessity for anyone who wants to grow into the future. So the thing is, Johan, I don't think we can force anyone to do anything. And I think the last thing that I would want to do as well, to come here and speak on behalf of a group of people. I'm here talking to you on behalf of myself and from my own experience. If you are not willing to face that, if you are not willing to have that tough conversation, you're not going to grow. You're not going to move into the future. You're always going to find it difficult. And there is freedom in confronting the past. I think anyone who has been in a tough situation in their life, who has faced trauma in their life, can say the same thing. There is freedom in facing that trauma down and saying, I understand now, and I understand what happened and why it happened, and I understand how to prevent it in the future, and I can now build. I'm not missing this entire chunk out of my armor. I have the whole picture. I know exactly that. But Johan, I think one of the things that really upsets me is you and I can talk about apartheid as a crime against humanity, and we can talk about the objective facts because that's the truth. That's what happened. It is a crime against humanity. There are people who don't agree with us. And my dilemma is I don't know how to bring them into the future. Because for me, it feels like if you're still at this stage, seeing apartheid as a woolly concept, seeing as not an issue that people were completely separated from each other. The first Black child I had in my school was in high school. That's not normal. I live in an African country. But if you are not willing to face that, then I don't know how to build with you. And that's the thing that frustrates me endlessly.
Let's flip that script now. And that's what a lot of people will say, and I understand that as well, is that the problem with these revisions is, in fact, our government, the African National Congress-dominated government, at least, and Black people, by and large, it will appear to me and to many other people, though, have sort of abused this history for own gain as well. I had an interview with a Black podcaster not too long ago, and he spoke about Abakleva, how your emotions as a white liberal is being played by Black people in South Africa, and their sense of entitlement that it all results in today as well. So I guess what we're looking for is that kind of nuanced and balanced discussion. But that's pretty fair to say that if you flip the script, that the opposite, the other side, has a point.
Not true, but yes. So the thing is, I think we also need to distinguish between what people read and see on social media and the actual lived experience of everybody else. So I was so fortunate to be part of a large, diverse group of friends. My kids are a large, diverse group of friends. So I get to interact with parents, Black parents and brown parents, Indian parents, as well as in my group of friends. And I can promise you, it certainly isn't anything that comes up or anything that that is said to trigger my emotions. I will definitely admit that I am absolutely triggered when, like I told you in the start, when I feel like somebody is trying to make a debate point by dehumanizing other people. I shut down completely. It makes me very angry. But I think in the flip of that script, you can, in fact, walk and chew gum. You can say, apartheid was a crime against humanity. We need to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. We are very privileged in where we are. We need to get stuck in and build, and that our governing party was really bad for this country, for the biggest.
Or that there are people that are milking the guilt.
I think there are people that are milking the guilt, but it's tough for me to say, Johan, and there I fall on the work that I do on a daily basis, where I see people who are unemployed, young people who have studied, they cannot find work, they are Black, their parents never worked, they don't have any frame of reference in terms of their close family of anyone who worked. So there are actual programs to help them fit into different workplaces. And I think once I've seen that side, it's very tough for me to say, milking for sympathy or whatever the case may be. That's not a tenderpreneur. That's a reality of what's happening in the country, and something that needs to be addressed.
It's a very nuanced and a very complex questions, of course, and it really has a lot to do with perceptions as well. Something else that I will say that I know will anger a lot of people. I came across the statistics and information about unemployment. Obviously, Black South Africans, how they suffer unemployment. The picture is very, very clear. But what astounded me about what I discovered in a piece of research that I did is that young Black people that enters the job market for the first time has it, despite all these BE laws, has it 6 to 7 times more difficult. And I talk about entry level now, starting your career, 6 to 7 times more difficult to get a job for a young Black person than what it is for a white person, young white person. And the reason for that is, and you mentioned that in your previous answer, in fact, is the white kid has the connectivity. There are people in the family or people in the environment that can actually assist him to get his first job, and that doesn't exist for the kid in the Black township. My question is, do you think today, 30 years post-apartheid, that we as white people still have a moral obligation towards our history, towards Black people, and how should that obligation express itself?
Well, we're white people living in Africa. We are unbelievably fortunate to, in my opinion, live in the most beautiful country in the world. I love South Africa passionately. I feel that every citizen of South Africa, regardless of their color, has a moral obligation to each other in this beautiful country of ours. So yes, I do think there is a moral obligation. I think where it shows again, and sorry for I keep bringing them up, but it's my reason for doing what I do. As a parent to my kids, it is our obligation to make sure that we teach our children correctly, because the sad reality is that what I have seen in white Afrikaner parents is that othering, that separateness between white and Black people is still being encouraged in households. And that to me it's unethical, it's immoral.
Can you explain that? Can you explain that to me? What do you mean with that?
So you said that I lived in Pretoria. I live in the north of Pretoria, and you will still see that. Unfortunately, you will still see situations where white children do not want to be friends with their Black classmates. You will see that. It's not a Pretoria problem, but it's white. It exists, and to me, this is not something that the children are learning spontaneously. Because if you leave children alone, they make friends with the people that they have the most in common with, and they have all sorts of different interests, and it's not constrained by a culture group or a race. If I meet racist 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds, there's a problem. There's a message that's being sent. There are things that are being said around the braai fire, and I have an issue with that. So yes, we have a moral obligation. And for those of us who do not engage in conduct like that, we have a moral obligation to educate and to reach out and to make sure that at some stage that thinking needs to die within our culture.
It's a very interesting point that touching on, and I refer back to Linda Koers again, also something that we touched on, and she sketched me the image of, we're having barbecues and I'm having my barbecues with my black neighbors. To me, and here's the question, is to be able to get to the point that I'm going to get to, I'm going to ask you to explain to me in what kind of social context do you live in Pretoria? Are you behind one of those, in those gated communities where people have to sign in to get in, or is it just another suburb? And then how integrated is that suburb?
So we are not a gated community. So watch me give away all of my different security concerns to your No, but
it's not the intention.
In all seriousness. So no, it's not a gated community. It's a regular suburb. So I live in a regular suburb, in a regular street. We have businesses and households, so it's kind of a mixed environment, and relatively mixed in the street. But we all kind of keep to ourselves because it's quite remote where I live. So we all band together when it, for security concerns, or we have a little street WhatsApp group where we discuss things, and it's multicultural. But where my social circle extends to is in my children's schools, because that's where I spend most of my time. So there, in terms of integration, my daughter is in a parallel medium school, government school, quite close to home, one English class per grade. And in this school as well, the English classes are predominantly Black kids. But the interesting thing is they also have a lot of Black children in the Afrikaans track, because in the area we have it's an area full of young families, and the little nursery schools are mostly dual medium. So these little children meet each other at 3 and 4 years old of the different cultural groups, and then some of the Black children and actually made friends with some of the Afrikaans children, learned the language. Their parents don't necessarily speak Afrikaans, and decided they're going to the Afrikaans primary school and Afrikaans high school, and there they go. So you see it happening, and it makes me so happy to be able to share my culture and language, and for people to be passionate about that as well. But I think the integration for me happens on that level. As I said, in the street, you know what white people are like, Johan. We're making friends here.
One or two very simple, straightforward questions. Do you think that racism is alive and well in South Africa?
Yes, I do. It's sad, but it's there's no denying it.
Do you believe that people from different cultural backgrounds, historical experiences, religion, social development can rise above all of that to become a kind of a single unit, a nation?
Absolutely. And I think you can't accept a gift if your hands are clenching and you're holding onto something. And I think that there is this fear that Afrikaner culture is going to disappear and the language is going to disappear and it's going to look so different, and oh my word, and we hold on to that idea. You can't accept the gift of a multicultural society when you're behaving like that. And it's a gift. It is a gift. It is a wonderful thing. I believe in the good in people. I believe in the fact that humanity. That's why I said it. It's a core tenet of my life. This belief that people deserve to be recognized as human beings. Nobody's supposed to go to bed hungry. Nobody is supposed to not have a roof over their heads. No child is supposed to wonder where the next meal is going to come from. And I think once we start uniting around those principles and all the different social ills in our country, we all put our heads together instead of everybody in their own corner, then we're going to move past that. Because we can say to each other, it's that walking and chewing gum thing, we can say to each other, I genuinely believe that apartheid was a crime against humanity and can never happen again. It can never happen again. It needs to be in my consciousness. I need to understand where that is. And at the same time, my country is burning. The unemployment rate and the youth unemployment rate is completely unacceptable. And I do not care if that youth unemployment rate represents 1% Afrikaners and 99% people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. It doesn't reduce the risk. It doesn't matter. We need to move forward. And I think the only way to do that is to organize around issues. And the issue is the sustainability of our country as a whole. What are we doing with kids? What are we doing with our youth? What are we doing about youth unemployment? Afrikaners, I think, are so uniquely positioned because there's still many of us who are in high positions and doing work that we really can make an impact and plow back. And I really think if that starts becoming our mindset, ignore the noise. Somebody's going to tell you, how many times I've been called a colonizer or the child of a colonizer. What am I going to do, Johan? It's true. How else would I have landed here? So I laugh it off and I say, it's fine. We need to build. We need to make a plan. We really need to make sure that all of us are on the same page. If you choose what you let in.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you say, but I want to actually re-ask the question. And I'm doing it very specifically. And I'm going to read exactly the same question to you. Do you believe that different people from very different cultural backgrounds, historical experiences, social development differences can rise above that to become a single unit, a nation? And then I'm going to add to that, I think it was Samora Machel who said, for the nation to live, the tribe must die. And then I guess my question would also be the fingers that point back to Europe. They say, well, Johan, you're sitting there in Amsterdam. How's it working out for you, this multicultural ideal? And then I will say the following to you as well, and then we're going to revisit this whole thing again, is that back in the late 80s and the 90s, I was one of the people that jubilated here in the streets of Amsterdam. Finally, we've arrived at this very progressive ideal of the multicultural, multilingual, multiracial society. And 30 years later, not only when I put the lens on South Africa, but when I look around me in my very own environment, I see how we're beginning to swallow our words. And I mean that very sincerely. Look at the UK, look at what's happening in France, look at what's happening in the very country where I sit in, where tensions flare from time to time again. So I spoke to the South Africa houses, we have South Africa House here on Keizersgracht, Zuid-Afrika. I had a new director who told me a wonderful story about what she called roots and wings. The stronger the root, her research has shown her, the stronger your identity, the stronger your sense of your culture and your identity, the stronger you are actually able to fly into the world and embrace all other cultures, but still in separate little unique spaces. So I guess the question would be, do you think 30 years post 1994 that Desmond Tutu's Rainbow Nation is still surviving or can survive or will survive?
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally, yes. Johan, your viewers are going to call me idealistic, I can tell you now, with a lot of other adjectives, which is fine.
But you got what I just told you now. I jubilated on exactly that as well. I celebrated with you as well.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the Rainbow Nation. I've had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela on a couple of occasions, same with Desmond Tutu, and believe me, I flew the balloons as well. I clapped hands. I was extremely ecstatic about the birth of finally where we are all just human beings. We are all just equal. We are all just the same. But it seems to me, and that's my observation 30 years later, that that's not quite the way the world works. And that's my question to you is, I'm questioning it today. Do you understand me and many other people questioning it today?
No, absolutely. And I think being in a position, I work for myself. So I'm able to dictate exactly what I do and who I do it with, which is in itself a huge privilege. If you are in a position where you are working where it isn't necessarily the case, you start, I think as politicians have a very good way of pitting us against each other and pitting us against each other despite our humanity. To answer your question, I believe 100% that in the idea of a rainbow nation and the fact that we will survive and that we can respect each other's cultures as being equal to each other. It doesn't mean that everything that happened in the past of the country magically disappears. And I think that's where people miss the mark. The scar that runs through this country runs really, really deep. And you can see it in terms of socioeconomic disparity as well. Did we have a different government who could have made different policy decisions, who would have had us out of the hole a lot better than what they did? Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't negate the reality that we live in today. So I think, to answer your question, that is a decision that every individual needs to make for themselves. I have decided I will not let anyone, any politician, pit me against somebody because they don't look like me or they don't sound like me. I'm not threatened by refugees. I'm not threatened by Black people, by brown people, by Indian people. When I see a human being, I see such an interesting, unique creation with this wonderful story and this way to plug into this larger machine that we have. Where the danger comes, and I take your point because it is true, you can see it all across Europe, this move towards extremist political parties, the move towards vilifying immigrant communities for all sorts of things that are social ills and government failures in different countries that are being pinned on refugee communities. The United States is a very good example of that. But you have to make a choice for yourself. Are you in or are you out? If you're out and you want to stay separate and you want to believe that your culture, because it's a Western culture, whatever that might be, is superior to another person's culture, and we keep tugging at that thread that keeps us together, we keep, carrying on with it, then I think this rainbow nation is never going to work. I think we all have a little responsibility in that.
Yeah. You use the word superior now. My impression when I talk to people is not that people see that as their own culture as being particularly superior or not. They just simply say it's different. And because it's different, it has a kind of, and I tell you, and I'm asking these questions because I've spoken to a lot of people in what you would consider traditionally classic right-wing people, to try to understand how they view it. I spoke to Dan Root, for example, who is known for his particularly ultra-conservative views, but who intellectually is able to try to state his case that in Dan Root's own words, and I'm asking this to challenge you and your notions, is that the highest form of liberty, of freedom, the highest progressive ideal that there could possibly be is the ability to actually have a little space, geographically so, in which you can express your own unique identity, non-threatening to the others and in good cooperation with the others. And that in itself becomes, when you talk to the intellectual right-wingers, becomes quite a progressive ideal.
I think, and that's why I want to point right back to the start of I would say respectfully. So I think the difference is I'm not a liberal. I'm a progressive. And what I told you right in the beginning of our discussion, my feeling has always been a community one. It hasn't been an individualistic one. So it's not who I am as a person. And I'm not alone. I know there are more people who feel like I feel. I just don't feel it serves my community, which is South Africa, to be separate. I don't believe in the separate. I believe in I want to say integration, but hear me out when I say integration. To use an example, every year with Heritage Day, in this very 70% white area that I live in, every Black person around here is dressed in their own traditional dress for the day. All the different businesses do it. I'm sure they do it all over South Africa. It's just very striking for me here where I am. The school does the same thing. You can wear, we're not going to wear Voortrekker dresses, so we normally wear our is what it is. But my children's friends will wear their traditional dress. Now, the idea is to share the culture with each other and to understand, oh, you are Sepedi or you are Setswana, and this is where you come from. Oh, you're an Afrikaner. You come from German people or French people or Irish people or whoever it might be. But that is the heritage that you have with you. If we have this separatist argument, what I have the issue with that is, for me, that doesn't serve the community as a whole. I think it's like, you know, the Bible story of putting the lamp under the bucket, you're shading yourself. You have the opportunity to share this wonderful culture, to have your culture, to practice your culture, and to still be integrated within a larger community. And there for me is freedom in that.
Yeah. Once again, it's very complex. It's very nuanced at the end of the day, and there are arguments that can be made on both sides intellectually, at least as well. But beyond the Springboks and Bafana, describe to me, what is your South African culture?
Oh, that's so funny. Yes, it's a difficult one, right? So I think, given my unique experience with Afrikanerdom, it has been a tough one. I don't identify with the large amounts of like the Voortrekker and all those different things that are going. I don't, because I come from a strain of Afrikaners who actually weren't. In as far as we can tell, in any of the wars or in any of the tracks or anything like that. So,
but I'm going to be very rude now and just say, let's just pause there for a moment. You say you can't identify, or the Voortrekker you mentioned, and I must say to you, in all sincerity, I wonder why. I sat here the other day talking to a filmmaker, and I said that I think that the story of the Afrikaner and the Voortrekker is as dramatic and as fantastical as the conquest of the cowboys, the westerns, the stories of great western movies in the USA, etc. It's a fantastic story. It's a romantic story. It's a story of bravery and a kind of a strive for. Why would one not want to identify with that?
It doesn't feel like it's my story. It feels disingenuous for me to say that's my story when I can't trace a single person back to that. So I'm unfortunately in a situation where
But you can't trace a single person back to the gumbo dance either, I would imagine.
No, that's true, and I don't do the gumbo dance because it doesn't feel quite right. So I think in terms of culture, that's why I said it's a really difficult one for me. It really is a difficult one for me. I'm at this stage, unfortunately, where I am in Pretoria as well. It feels like there definitely was a right-wing effort to take over the Afrikaner culture, the Voortrekker, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And out of that, I think, for my own experience, isn't something I would ever want to identify.
Okay, but what you're saying to me, let me try to interpret it for you as well, and let me help you out in this process, because I'm 100 years older than you. Is I think what you're saying to me is not identifying with that; it is the way in which you feel it's been perversed by others and misused and abused by others, and that's why you say, "Hey, hold on, that's not my story." Because truly, if you say to me that you can truly not identify with that, then I would find it a sad loss for you as an individual. I would find it a sad loss for anybody who've lost their own sense of identity or their own sense of history or whatever. And I really mean it very sincerely when I say that. So I understand where you come from. I think what you're saying is that others perverted it for me, and therefore I'm unable to relate to it. Am I saying it more or less correct?
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, if I could trace people back, or I had a very strong claim or whatever it may be, I would feel very inclined to stand up and say, this is, as you said, an epic story. It is human beings involved. It is not to be perverted for political purposes. We're not going to do that. This is history. I don't have that. So I tend to stand back a little bit. And not really get involved, because from a moral point of view, as you said, it makes it very difficult for me. I wouldn't be able to identify with the way that the culture is celebrated at the moment.
Yeah. But I do trust that you won't deny other people the right to identify with that.
You know, that's actually something I wanted to say right at the start of our conversation. I'm not here to talk on behalf of anyone. I'm here to share my own experience with you. The only people that I feel quite strongly about the deplatforming discussion, again, is people who dehumanize other people. If you dehumanize other people, if you have and certain organizations who have central tenets that feel that I, as a woman, because of their religious beliefs and not supposed to be in the workplace, should be at home. That kind of thing. I don't mess with that.
Yeah.
I don't.
I get it. Okay. Just to round this part of the discussion off, and we'll move on to Donald Trump. That's our next discussion point. How would you describe the biggest dilemma facing Afrikaners today? And it's a bit of a difficult question, I would imagine. But right now, is it our survival? Is it our guilt towards our history? Is it our identity loss? What's the biggest dilemma facing the Afrikaner today?
I think the dilemma is self-inflicted. I don't think there's anybody sitting on our shoulder going, you need to, okay, there's one or two, and some of them wear red berets and say we need to give the land back, I'm sure. But other than that, and other than on the outskirts of politics, our issue is our navel-gazing. The issue is the navel-gazing. Everybody would go, what is an Afrikaner? If I have to have one more conversation about what is an Afrikaner, I'm going to pick up and run away, because it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Were you born in a household full of Afrikaners? I'm sorry to say, you are an Afrikaner. Congratulations, you're part of the group. It's an ethnicity. It's an ethnicity. It's not supposed to be the thing that defines your entire existence as a human being. I think really we need to start. So I think what faces us and what our biggest crisis is the navel-gazing. We are not dying out. Our language is flourishing. We have 40 million people in South Africa who can speak or understand Afrikaans. That's unbelievable for such a young language. We have culture is interesting, and I think once we range it from the right-wing extremists, then we can go ahead with that. We are not erased from the history books. And when you speak to your Black colleagues and Black friends, they are inquisitive, they are interested. Which is I've always find so lovely. They sit you down, it's like from which brand are you? Like what ship? How did you get here? They're inquisitive. They want to participate. So just get out of your own way and start participating. The country has so many possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah. Did I hear you right when you said, I think I heard you saying 40 million people that can speak/understand Afrikaans. That's incredible.
And
that's incredible.
Who told me? My Indian best friend. She says it's the best language to gossip in any event, because she overheard somebody in Germany while she was attending a course there who was saying, Charlize Theron said, there's only 44 speaking Afrikaans. And she stopped them. She said, there's 40 million of us.
Yeah, that's great to consciously think about that. Donald Trump, his claim that there is a persecution of Afrikaners. Do you think that that's a good focus, at least internationally, on the country and the situation in the country? Or is it bringing about unnecessary tension in South Africa? And is it something that is tangible in South Africa, this whole tension around persecution or not persecution? I guess the question is, do you feel the temperatures have gone up since this whole story broke and Trump's reference to us as a persecuted people?
I'm not a politician. That is a lie. What he's saying is a lie. It's not a fuzzy reality. It's a lie. And it's a lie that was lobbied into him, and probably by all the nefarious South Africans surrounding him, who I'm not fans of. And I'm not fans of their work, and I'm definitely not fans of in terms of the tech oligarchs and the way that, algorithms are a story for a complete different conversation. But he was influenced into this position, and this is the hard line that he's taking now. And it's such a convenient political hobby horse because of the fact that, South Africa is standing up and taking the case to the ICJ against Israel. There's a lot of political underpinnings for why we are where we are, but it's a lie. We are not being persecuted in any way. We are privileged and fortunate to be in the country that we are. We have freedom. We have a constitution that protects us, all of us. To me, it was flabbergasting when I saw that the first time, and I thought, good heavens, why are you focusing on us? Just turn that eye of Sauron on another country. Does it really have to be us? But no, I think it's terrible politically for our country. It's doing so much damage to race relations in the country. I must say that the people that I've interacted with in my circle who are black people, Indian people, colored people, they handle it with humor, which is such a uniquely South African thing that I'm always so thankful for. They make fun of it, which is great. Like rather laugh about this nonsense in all of us at each other's throats. It's a joke, Johan, to think that we are the grouping, the cultural grouping in the country that still holds so much economic power, that still are mostly in the position. We have the lowest poverty rate of any of the different, racial groupings. We have the lowest unemployment rate. I have no words.
Yeah. Well, I think the question that I also want to ask regarding this is, do you believe that Trump really believes that there's a persecution of Afrikaners, or is this not really, at the end of the day, cold fact, geopolitical bashing it out with South Africa, that this is just not, that it's at the end of the day, and Trump knows it as well, it's just theater to try to punish South Africa for South Africa's foreign policy, our relationship with China, Russia, Israel, etc. Isn't that really what it's all about, as opposed to?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I don't think he believes in anything aside from the almighty dollar. So I really don't think he's on some sort of crusade to save the white Afrikaner. And it drives me insane to see on social media how many white Afrikaners see this individual as their own personal messiah. It's blasphemy. Awful. So no, I don't think he believes it. I don't think he believes in anything that's not going to benefit him personally at the end of the day. I think it was unfortunate that there are lobby groups who literally handed him the whip to beat us with this issue. It's unreal.
I guess I don't have to even ask that. You're saying to me here that it is Solidarity, AfriForum, and those organizations that have spread this information. Do you think that they bear any responsibility in South Africa? I know politicians saying, high treason and all sorts of things. I mean, but is that something that is worthwhile investigating and should be investigated? And should they be exposed for spreading whisper this into the ears of
whoever? No. Look, I think we have to draw that distinction as well. As you said, there is such a thing as freedom of speech. We are protected in terms of our own constitution, in terms of what we can say. We are not protected from the consequences of that speech. So if there is something that nefarious that occurred, I'm not a specialist in terms of government lobbying, foreign lobbies, how you're supposed to register, what you're supposed to do. I know that there were direct lobbying efforts, and everybody in South Africa who follows any of these organizations' social media pages know that there were repeated White House visits, and there's repeatedly this narrative that Afrikaners are persecuted, and that we have the most race laws in the country, and all these like little marketing sound bites. And unfortunately, the United States has a president that's really susceptible to short marketing sound bites, and it was convenient. So I think in terms of an investigation, I'm also not in favor of giving them more oxygen. I think the sad reality is that their followers are probably also going to be the people who suffer economically if anything were to happen. So if we're kicked out of AGOA, there's a massive impact for our economy. And it's their members as a union. I'm talking about Solidarity specifically. It's their members as the union who are going to get hurt at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So my feeling is it's like the Jack Russell was chasing a car, and now that Jack Russell has caught that car and they don't know what to do with it now. You can ride this Afrikaner refugee thing till the cows come home. The majority of Afrikaners aren't going anywhere. We're not relocating. I have no interest in being a refugee in the United States.
You work for Solidarity, and you worked for Solidarity for 12 years as a trade union organizer.
Yeah.
What was that
Isn't
like?
that just a perfect career choice for me anyway? So no, when I was in my third year of LLB studies, I did labor law and I just fell in love immediately. I knew labor law was what I wanted to do. I had no interest in being in a court or anything like that. So I finished my degree and then I strong-armed myself into the union for the following reason. They actually were very involved in a set of retrenchments that occurred in Telkom in the 2003, 2004. My dad was one of the people who actually went through a retrenchment then. So he had a daughter in final year of university, he had a daughter in final year of school, and then my middle sister in between, and suddenly lost his job. And because of the lobbying efforts that the unions did, it was the Communications Workers Union. There's another one whose name I can't remember now, and then Solidarity was the other one. They had a program brought in where these people who had lost their jobs could actually go through a training program, and then they're sort of first in line if new vacancies arise. And thankfully, he was able to find something, and he managed to work at that second opportunity until the day that he retired. So that made a profound impact on me of the power of unionism. As I said, loved labor law. Solidarity was super easy to get hold of. The other unions are not, so it's very difficult to get in. Flew all the way, had an interview with them. I was based in Port Elizabeth at that stage, and then I worked for them as a union organizer for 12 years.
Is your relationship, is it a bit sort of schizophrenic that on the one hand you're not too happy about what they do, and on the other hand I get the impression that you are saying at the same time that they are actually quite effective and quite professional and know what they're doing, that they're actually quite strong in what they're doing?
It's so tough. It's so tough because the thing is, I respect the people on the union side of things. This is a huge organization, by the way, so I'm not. This is not a blanket statement on all of them. I worked in one small part of it, which was the heartbeat, which was that union. And I also didn't work on the marketing or anything like that. I worked at labor relations specifically. That's what I did every single day. And for that, that's hard work. It's a tough thing to do. And I respect colleagues who are still there, who are still doing the hard work. I have always had a problem with the politics. I had a problem with the politics from day one. I was causing trouble from day one. I'm amazed that they kept me on for 12 years because of that.
I'm amazed as well.
Right? Might be because I'm really good at my job, but no, it's just a question of, honestly, when I started there was 2005. And the politics didn't touch us as much in 2005. Very different organization than what it is now. So I could avoid it because I'm very busy, right? I was organizing universities and it was a lot on my plate. Also, youngly married, new kids, little babies, it was a lot. So I could stay away from the politics until I couldn't stay away from the politics anymore. And also as a woman in a union in general, Solidarity is guilty, but they're all guilty. Women struggle to make any sort of career progress within a union environment. It's usually very flat structures. It's super male dominated. It's just a very difficult thing. So in 2017, I decided to cast my net a little bit wider and go and have a look. And I actually moved to the opposite side of the table. So represent employers, but not in labor disputes, in policy making specifically. So I negotiate policy at NEDLAC and labor policy and development policy specifically. But politics always bothered me. It was always there from day one.
Now let's move on to what do you think is the biggest dilemma facing Afrikaners today?
I think we're so scared that our culture and language are going to disappear that we don't want to integrate. And I'm being very generous here because I'm sure there are also people who still believe that apartheid wasn't so bad and we shouldn't integrate. But I think for the like sort of the middle of the bell curve, not a lefty like me or super right wing, the middle of the bell curve, I think it's the struggle of daily life and survival and as an Afrikaner, like where exactly is my place? Where am I supposed to fit in? It's navel-gazing and we think too much. We need to get stuck in. I remember growing up, one of my mom's favorite things to tell us is if you have this sort of internal struggle and you're not feeling great, do something for someone else. Take yourself out of this, stop navel-gazing, stop ruminating, get out of it by doing something for someone else. And I think I wish there were more opportunities, and I would love to create more opportunities for Afrikaners to get stuck into the community and get involved in interesting things.
Yeah, great piece of advice from your mother there, I must say. That really is
it's very helpful.
Wonderful to think of those terms. Let's talk about specific flashpoints. We're going to start rushing through things a little bit because I think we're running out of time here. Let's talk about specific flashpoints that trigger the anger amongst our people that causes the outrage. So let's start with number one, Black economic empowerment. Is that a fair fix for apartheid?
No.
Or is it reverse racism?
It's not reverse racism, and it also doesn't fix apartheid. It stands to benefit a very small percentage of people, and we've also reduced race relations to all these different numbers that you're chasing numbers. What did Bob Marley say? Can't chase money because money are numbers, and numbers are infinite, and you'll be chasing it for the rest of your life. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah. But apart from the perversion of it in terms of its application in South Africa, apart from just the raw corruption of it all and so on, the concept, the idea itself, is it applicable to South Africa 30 years post-apartheid? And is it then in that sense, is it reversed racism, or is it healing the scars of apartheid?
I think
in other words, the real intentions is what I'm talking about. If we strip it off, we all know about the corruption. We all know that 2% of the privilege got the benefit of Black economic empowerment.
Yeah, no, absolutely no issue with it. I don't think it's reverse apartheid. I think it's as a small business owner myself, I've been in this position where you have to bid for work, and there needs to be, I'm the sole owner of this little business. Every time I've brought colleagues of different races and cultural groups on board, it has benefited my business. So I really think we need to reframe that for ourselves. It's not reverse racism. It's giving everybody an opportunity. And if you are clever about it and you are proactive about it, there are massive opportunities in that area as well.
Short question again and short answer. Land expropriation without compensation, is that justice overdue, or is that theft that is just simply tanking the economy and chasing potential foreign investment?
I think it's a boogeyman. Can I have the third option, please? I think it's a giant boogeyman because this has existed in our legal system forever. It has always been there. The piece of legislation as it stands, I think I'm not an expert at all, but there are experts who have said that it can be challenged the way that it is at the moment. The intention was never to redress apartheid through compensation or through expropriation without compensation. It wasn't once. It wasn't mentioned like that. It hasn't been applied like that. So no, it's to me a giant political nothing burger. That's what it is.
Let's talk about BELA bashing. The Afrikaans language.
My other big subject.
Is the Afrikaans language culture under threat?
Yeah.
Are Afrikaners overstating their fears, or more simply put, is the ANC bent on destroying Afrikaans in schools?
Firstly, the Minister of Education from the DA. I think that's the first thing. So if people want to make this an ANC thing, it's not an ANC thing. The department implementing this has a DA minister in the first place. In the second place, our government schools need to reflect the communities that are around the schools. And as the communities change, the schools are going to change. I think the way to go for a lot of schools are going to be parallel medium. I know this is something that's been fear-mongered about since I was a child in high school. It was a huge issue. If you have a parallel medium school, it's going to end up being English. It's not going to be Afrikaans, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, having had kids now in a parallel medium school, where you have these schools properly situated and they are reflective of the community at large, that is immediately surrounding the school, because that's how it works in Gauteng. You have to be within a certain geographical area. There's no issue with that. Our language is not going to die out. It's not going to die out as a medium of instruction. What is going to happen, and we've seen this happen, I think there was recently a primary school in Cape Town that went from having Afrikaans classes to having no Afrikaans classes, only English, and all the parents are Afrikaans speaking, but the connotation of the language isn't good. So people prefer to speak English and they prefer to put their kids in English schools.
Yeah.
That is And I think that's something we need to look at. But if for more information on this, I went to FETSAS, who are over all the different school governing bodies. And I got my information directly from them. And at this stage, they are not ringing alarm bells. They're still encouraging, parents need to be involved in the governing bodies of their schools, and they need to be aware that the decisions are being made, but there's no 5-alarm fire on BELA.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of research there as well, and just want to state this is the information that I got, and then do with it what you want. Since the BELA Act fully took effect in 2025, nearly 500 former single-medium Afrikaans public schools have already been forced to introduce English streams this year alone, accelerating the decline so sharply that the last purely single-medium government Afrikaans schools are now projected to vanish by the early 2030s, likely 2032 to 2035.
I have a question for you on that. What is the problem? I don't have a problem with a double medium school. And if there isn't enough children in a specific geographical area to sustain an Afrikaans-only school, then the reality is that it's going to have to be a double medium school. And as a parent who's with a double medium school just down the road from us, who's been parallel medium for decades, Afrikaans is going nowhere and the English is going nowhere, and they are coexisting and they are one school. So I guess that's where my issue comes in. I understand that looks like it's this massive attack against a language, but we also have to be realistic about our numbers in South Africa. We don't necessarily have the numbers in each and every suburb as Afrikaans-speaking people to have single medium Afrikaans schools in those areas.
Yeah, I'll give you my simple answer to that. I just give you the facts as I understand the facts, and it will appear to me that it is a great privilege for me that I speak a language that will still be represented in South African schools, that it's Afrikaans and English, and I say a pity that it's not many more other different languages, if ways could be found in which one could accommodate them. So I stated the fact, not a sympathy or an empathy with anything. Just take a note here. I noted that affirmative action laws, of which I think I can claim that I was a victim of, if I want to use the word victim. SABC got rid of me after a while as their foreign correspondent, and that was purely based not on my performance, but on racial quotas. Be it as it may, according to AfriForum and the Solidarity people, roughly 400,000 whites have had to make space since 1994. That's 25% of working whites in South Africa that were directly affected by affirmative action. Can you understand that it feels hard, tough, that it feels painful, and that it is in fact painful?
Yeah, look, I was myself. I've a lot of empathy. Been through it myself. I'm working for myself due to necessity. That's how it just worked out, and that was the journey. But my observation is that there are still lots of white people working, employed in different spaces, in different areas, where you were the victim of something like that. I don't think it's correct. And if you look at how affirmative action is supposed to be implemented, it's not supposed to be a hard and fast quota system. It's not supposed to be completely not take into consideration the broader community that a particular employer is situated in. And you would also have seen that the business community as a whole has taken the new affirmative action regulations, the new Employment Equity Act regulations, to court, based on exactly that, based on the fact that we are devolving into a quota system that has to be sort of reflective of the country as a whole versus the different provinces or towns we are in. So nobody is saying that this is a faultless system. It's not a faultless system. And where people were displaced due to quotas, it's not correct, and it shouldn't be occurring. And I do believe that solidarity also does a lot in terms of taking those kinds of cases to court and making sure that there are precedent and that there is case law in this regard. I also think there are employers who took things completely too far to the other side, and have absolutely no white people on staff, which is also silly because you are messing with your own diversity. Diversity means all of us, not just one grouping of us. At the same time, I wouldn't throw out affirmative action measures completely. It makes no sense in a country such as ours. It makes sense that there is still preferential treatment at such a time that we are able to compete equally, because we can't at the moment.
Yeah. I'm sort of moving towards the end of the program now. I have this question in my mind. I really personally think about it a lot, is this thing of what are we fighting for? And part of the answer would be that, well, I guess we're fighting for our little space, our little place in South Africa. And I guess it is finding peace in that little space that we have a right to have in South Africa. I took note here for myself that by the end of this century, time moves very fast, Afrikaans speakers, Afrikaners, will be about 2.6 million out of a South African population that will grow to about 85 to 90 million. That's a tiny percentage in a huge, huge country with a large population. I guess my question really is, I doubt whether the idea that the Afrikaner or the white man will disappear for the next 100 or 200 years. It might be a reality in 400, 500, 600 years' time, but for the foreseeable future, this is not going to happen. But the question is, what role do we play? And is it going to be a positive, constructive role, or is it going to be a negative role? And which brings me to, we've just had the Day of the Val, an important date in Afrikaner history for many Afrikaners. Did you attend any of the events or?
No, I was traveling, but I generally don't. Don't. We celebrate it as a day of reconciliation. So that really isn't something that we partake in as a family. I understand that there are historical ties, but unfortunately, I think it's one of those things that have been so taken over by right-wing forces that it really isn't something I identify with.
Yeah, no, still back to my theme of what are we fighting for? I took note here for myself that when the new South Africa came into being, and I remember back in 1995 or so at the Voortrekker monument, there were a tiny group of people that were attending these moments, these commemorations in South Africa. But it grew. In the early 2000s, it grew up to 20,000. Yesterday, it was more than 40,000 people.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. So, and we're going to end with that, it's clearly that the Afrikaner is still and will be a force in the future of South Africa. I guess my question is, from your view on things, there's a return, obviously, if you see 40,000 people yesterday, there's a return to the sense of Afrikanerhood. I read another statistic that also said that back in 2015 or so, there was something like 25% of Afrikaners identify themselves as South Africans as opposed to the ethnic group Afrikaners. That has shot through the roof as well. It's now 75%. Does that mean is it a positive force for South Africa, or is it a negative force for South Africa?
It's not currently a positive force for South Africa. I think it potentially could very well be, definitely. Because to answer your question, yes, we're going to be in the minority, and we're also always going to be in the minority, and that just is what it is. You can decide whether that defines you or whether you want to take part and make sure that our country is world class, and our country has its rightful place in our continent and in the world as well. I think, unfortunately, the way that the culture and the identity is being weaponized makes me very uncomfortable. I think that there is no way that you can bring a constructive contribution to South Africa if you are so othering yourself and keeping yourself completely separate from the rest of the country. That was why apartheid fell. It's a stupid ideology. There's no other way for me to say it. And the fact that we have people in 20, 25, 30 years after our new country was born, who still have the idea that we are separate and we need to be separate and you are entitled to your whites-only spaces and your Afrikaner-only spaces. That is a problem.
I suppose that when you see the pictures at the Voortrekker monument and you see these people singing and the sunlight, that I don't know what's the correct way of describing it, the power of that all, and the fact that it is 40,000 people, does that signal and say to us the Afrikaner is back? And if it does signal to us that, what in your estimation does that mean for the future of South Africa? A tougher road ahead for the multicultural democracy?
I think, no, it doesn't signal that the Afrikaner is back. It signals that we are moving backwards. And that concerns me. I myself, I'm a churchgoer. I have, I've relied on my faith a lot through the years. I understand that. But I think if you are, there was a missed opportunity because the message needs to be about reconciliation and about being a part of a whole. You look the way you look, you are the way you are, you have the culture the way you are, and that enables you to make a contribution to your country as a whole. And that needs to constantly be reinforced and be the message. And in terms of seeing that, it makes me uncomfortable. I am concerned, and I'm also worried that it's our different identities and our insecurities being weaponized and being used to manipulate us emotionally.
Yeah. It's going to be an unfair question, perhaps. If there's one policy change that could heal or doom the soul of South Africa tomorrow, what would that be?
You're asking a policy person now. that is a very difficult thing. I wouldn't force anything. Johan, let me answer it this way. I don't think a policy position to force anything is the right way. I think what we need to do is to look at what is keeping us as the majority of our country poor, and what is keeping the majority of our country hungry, and what is keeping the majority of our country unemployed. And those are a lot of different structural things that need to be fixed. So I don't have a magic bullet. I don't have one single thing I would like to change. I certainly wouldn't force all Afrikaners to go do mandatory apartheid training, that's for sure. And I wouldn't force anyone into anything. But I think we need to change our focus into our country as a whole, and how do we fix those structural inequalities and problems that we are faced with.
Yeah. I'm going to say to you, a great compliment to you, because you nailed it there 100% from my perspective, because this will be my last question and it touches on exactly what you said. And I think your answer was exactly 100% in line with my own thinking. The question would be, why is nobody talking about the incredible scale of poverty today in South Africa, with 12 million people that will go to bed tonight with not enough food? 60% live under the poverty line in South Africa right now. 60 to 80 children under 5 die every month from severe acute malnutrition. I think your answer was spot on.
That's where we need to focus, Johan. That's where we need to focus in our country.
Jahni De Villiers, thank you very much for this lovely discussion.
Thank you, Johan.